Wherever you are on your leadership voyage, it starts here.
Hey, everybody. It's great to be back with you again. Leadership Voyage, the podcast dedicated to your pursuit of becoming a great leader. My name is Jason Wick, here for episode 2 of season 4. Great to be kicking it off again this March 2025 and getting more episodes going and more information to you all. It's exciting to be back up here and doing this all again. So thanks again for tuning in and for listening and following along and upping your leadership game. It's a great time to do that, and that's part of what we're going to talk about today is the latest State of the Global Workplace report that came out from Gallup. I think I downloaded it just 3 weeks ago or so. Very, very early March, I got access to this report, and you can too. If you go to Gallup's website, give them your email address. I think you can download the report in full or the key insights. But before we get into that, I want to talk about a few things. First of all, as I just said, it's great to be back for season 4. Season 4, episode 1 dropped a few weeks ago, and it's just exciting to be back and reinvigorated and re-energized doing all this again and sharing with you all and hearing from you all, which is fantastic. If you want to reach out to me, drop me an email. startyourvoyage@gmail.com. Of course, you can find me, Jason Wick, or the podcast on LinkedIn, and that's a great place to reach out and engage as well. But yeah, basically it's March, it's spring here in the United States officially. I myself was fortunate enough to be able to go on a spring break trip with my family to the San Francisco Bay Area. A road trip. We went through Salt Lake City, saw some friends, and stayed with friends in the Bay Area, which was a fantastic trip. A great experience for my kids to see the San Francisco Bay Area for the first time. I used to live there back in the day, and it was nice to see some things that I hadn't seen in a while and to share some of those with my kids. I hope that you also have an opportunity to take a break during this springtime, and it's always critical to be able to give yourself a little mental checkout, I think, and regroup and reset every so often. So hopefully you all get the opportunity to do that here in this spring, if you haven't already. I've got an upcoming episode here in season 4 that's going to deal with interviewing highlights and lowlights. If you've got something you'd like to share with me, please feel free to reach out via any means. In the show notes, you'll see you can actually text me as well if you like. There's a link in the show notes for this episode. So tell me about your highlight or lowlight, either as an interviewer or an interviewee. I've already heard from several folks, almost 10 people so far sharing their experiences, and I'd love to be able to share those anonymously, of course, with the audience. But I'm working on that episode. That'll be coming up, so stay tuned for that one. That'll be pretty interesting and some entertaining items as well, to be honest, interviewing highlights and lowlights. So today's episode is focused on the Gallup State of the Global Workplace report, which, as I said, came out a few weeks ago here in March 2025. I was able to download it and read through the report. There's even the key insights document, which is kind of the concise version of what's important to take away. And what we've got in this report are three important parts that they focus on. And those parts are about mental health, the economy, and then managers. And the part that I want to focus on the most today is managers. But these 3 parts, let's talk about the first 2 parts a little bit, just in brief. The employee mental health piece, and this is globally, but they're talking about 1/5 of the employees in the world experience loneliness on a daily basis. And we heard a lot about this coming out of the pandemic. I even heard once, I can't remember the source, so I apologize for that, but there were many, many folks coming out of the pandemic the most common number of how many people in your life do you have that you can confide in? The most common number was 0. actually. And I thought that was a stunning number to hear a few years back. Loneliness is high among remote workers, and that is, of course, of concern. It's it's sad to read that younger employees in particular are seeing their well-being scores going down year over year. And of course, these parts of your life, they affect how engaged you are in your overall life and work experiences. And we know, right? We know that there is a connection between how important you see your work to be, how engaged you are with work, and how your overall satisfaction in life is. The more meaning that you find in your work, the more likely it is that you'll find more meaning in your life, that you'll thrive in your life. Work is such an important part of our life, right? It's one of the key areas that people find meaning is through their work. So that's the first part of this report, and we're not going to get into much depth there, but that's the first part, employee mental health. The second part is about economy, and it talks about how much money is lost in the global economy. I think it was close to was it billion or trillion? Let me check that real quick. It was trillion, yeah. $8.9 trillion is what the economy loses globally as a result of low employee engagement. And that's a staggering number. The reason I couldn't remember if it was billion or trillion is I can't really wrap my head around either number, to be honest. But $8.9 trillion, or about 9% of global GDP, is the economic impact of low employee engagement. And that's what this other section is here about, the role of economics and well-being. But the third section of this report is really the part that I'm most interested in for the podcast, and I suspect as listeners, many of you are interested in the most, and that's about management. And, heads up, I'm going to have two very, very loose political references here. Nothing partisan in this show, of course, but the first thing here is when I think about the role of the manager coming in this report, which is that managers account for 70% of the variance that we see in employee engagement. It takes me back to, I think it was James Carville's still around, but James Carville was one of the key guys in Bill Clinton's 1992 race to become president, I believe it was, back in the day, and he said, "It's the economy, stupid." This makes me think it's the manager, stupid. It's not, we don't have to overthink this. The manager is the key to most things when it comes to how engaged and performant the workforce is. It doesn't have to be rocket science, right? So part 3 in this global report is really about the role of the manager. So a few things come out of this section that I think you'll find very interesting. First, although managers are generally a little bit more engaged and more thriving than your average contributor, if you want to characterize it that way, they are indeed experiencing more negativity than non-managers, right? They have a lot more pressure, generally speaking. They're in between, right? They're that in between layer, the middle management, getting directives strategically from upper management and having to propagate information to contributors and perhaps managers below them. It's a challenge, and they feel a lot of that back and forth and being pushed and pulled directionally and a lot of those things. And they're the messenger, right? When you think of don't shoot the messenger. We know that managers are really important in that recipe, and they face a lot of stress as a result. So again, although managers are more engaged, generally speaking, and generally thriving more in life, they are more likely to experience stress, sadness, loneliness, and anger than non-managers in an organization. And that's something to take note of. I think this is important to recognize too, because we've talked about it many times on the program, but managers are so important to the well-being of employees. Who's there to support the managers? And so managers are important to the organization at large because they often provide that support to employees. They have a huge impact on your average employee's mental health. There was a study that came out a few years ago in 2022 talking about how your manager, I did a podcast episode on this. Managers have the equivalent mental health impact on someone as their own partner. So if an employee has a partner, it's almost as likely that their manager would have as big of an impact on their emotional health, their mental well-being, as their own partner at home. And if you think about that, that's what people talk about at the dining room table, right? They talk about their managers. What did their manager do today? What is the manager deciding that impacts them? For better, for worse? It's part of the reality, right? And so managers have a huge impact on employees because they provide that emotional support. And that's a very important element to recognize here. When it comes to the managers, again, this idea, it's the managers stupid, right? When you have engaged managers, you have engaged employees. That's what comes out of this report as well. 70% of the variance, in team engagement is related to the manager. We can have strategy, we can have vision, we can have perks, we can have work-life balance, we can have all these fantastic policies and all these fantastic structural elements to organizations. But the fact of the matter, according to this report, is that well beyond any other factor, the manager is what impacts engagement at the organization on the employee level. That is the real important part here. And again, it's not surprising. People, what's the line? Agree or disagree? People don't leave companies, or they leave managers. And that's really what this is trying to say, I think. Now, the third part about this section about managers is what they coin best practice organizations. And in best practice organizations, generally speaking, 75% of their managers are engaged. And that means that about 70% of their non-managers are engaged. Thinking back to this correlation we just talked about, when a manager is engaged, it's more likely that the employees are engaged. When a manager is engaged in providing great support, constant engagement with that employee, constantly meeting, providing feedback, making sure everything's clear, listening, it's going to be more likely that you're seeing a high employee engagement score. And so that's what's really interesting here are these three elements about the manager. Managers have more negative experiences, which brings the idea to me that we need to make sure managers are getting support and training. Second, engaged managers lead to an engaged workforce. And third, these best practice organizations, which we all want to have, 75% of their managers are engaged, which leads to about 70% of their employees being engaged, which once again supports that connection. I just said early on in the program I was lucky enough to have a spring break trip, and as part of that, I was actually back to from where I grew up and saw a bunch of family as well. And a lot of people I was speaking with struggling with the uncertainty going on right now. I heard talk about the tariffs, not sure what to do with the tariffs. It was impacting their businesses. The layoffs going on right now, particularly in tech, and the fear that has brought, the volatility and uncertainty. And that brings me to this idea, perhaps, of my second political reference here, which I believe Ronald Reagan, there was a term, trickle-down economics, which was not a positive term when thinking about Ronald Reagan's policy, but the idea there was that by investing in the upper layer economically, uh, uh, upper wealthiest layer of Americans, that would trickle down into have positive impacts. And again, trickle down wasn't a positive term. But when I think about trickle down impacts, right, it makes me think that based on these findings, that investing in managers right now, amidst all the uncertainty, is what trickles down or trickles throughout or permeates throughout the rest of the organization. That if you're going to invest in something, it's really important to make sure that the managers are equipped, that the managers are skilled, that when you do this, it will lead to higher productivity, higher profitability, lower absenteeism, lower turnover. But it's so easy to gloss over this idea that it's the managers, stupid, right? The middle management layer is the heartbeat of the organization. And that is what influences the day-to-day doers in a company, which ultimately enable the company to deliver on its mission and purpose. And I think that's something that gets overlooked quite a bit. Investing in those managers. And that's why this program exists, right? Is to help people sharpen their leadership skills and help people become better managers. And that's what Leadership Voyage is all about. So a quick recap today about this Gallup State of the Workplace, State of the Global Workplace report. There were 3 large buckets in this report, and in the third one, we focused on 3 more specific areas. So first, the 3 large areas, mental health impacts right now of work, or really how people are doing at work. And in that part, a pretty frustrating 20% of people experiencing loneliness. The second large bucket being about the economy and the impacts that it has, the impacts that some of these well-being elements have on the economy. $9 trillion lost. And then the third section, of course, about managers. And inside of that management part, managers having more negative experiences than non-managers. Engaged managers lead to engaged employees. And the definition of this best practice organizations, where you see 75% of managers engaged, 70% of employees engaged. And of course, you don't achieve that without some investment. You don't achieve that overnight without really thinking about how do I equip my management layer, that heartbeat of the organization, with something that's influential on the rest of the employees. So that's my take on Gallup's State of the Global Workplace 2024. I look forward to next time with this new episode coming up about the highlights and lowlights of interviewing process. Again, feel free to drop me an email, startyourvoyage@gmail.com. Text me through the link in the show notes. Or, I look forward to hearing from you and looking forward to this next episode coming up soon here in April on Leadership Voyage. Until next time, everybody take care.